Titus and Roni, obviously in the past we've talked about the Millennium trilogy. Titus and Roni goes in a slightly different direction. Could you give us a brief summary of the book?
Well, first of all, Titus and Roni is much more overtly fiction. There are stories woven through Millennium trilogy, but Titus and Roni are two works of fiction, and they're two works of fiction in the same book, because they are two novellas which I hope complement each other, and where the what's that famous mathematical equation? The sum is greater than the sum of the parts. I've always fascinated by people in extremes that are facing crises in their life. I think that crisis very often defines us, can unearth within us that which actually makes us tick. There are two stories about people facing the biggest crises of their life. Titus is a grandfather kidnapped by guerrillas in Colombia, almost certainly mistakenly for somebody else, who happens to be out with his grandson. I'm pretty sure that Titus, left to his own devices, would have crumbled, but because he's got his grandson in tow with him, it necessitates him finding parts of himself that he's not even aware of, and becoming, in fact, in my opinion, some kind of hero, because he actually looks after this boy in an incredibly gentle and tender way, and also is fairly convinced he's going to be killed by the guerrillas, so is trying to impart, at the same time as not frightening his grandson, is trying to impart to his grandson what he's learnt about life, that he thinks that it is important that his grandson be bequeathed. Roni is 24 hours, the worst 24 hours in the life of a Scottish woman whose son is in 24 hours' time going to be executed. And she too, it sounds grim, but the story isn't one of grimness. The story is one of self-discovery and of actually, there's sadness in it, but there is some grimness in it, because it is a very touching situation. But I think that both stories are stories of great optimism and great hope, and they are designed to talk about journeys that we all take from time to time inside of ourselves, that actually make us more complete human beings than we would be without taking those journeys.
So how did the idea come to you, Greg, and what motivated you to sit down and write it?
Well, I guess, they've been germinating for a long time, I think. Years ago, I took a bus journey from Bogota to Medellin in Colombia, and my bus was actually stopped at one point as we were going through the countryside, and a couple of guerrillas got on board and wanted what I suppose was a toll for passing through their territory. At that stage, certainly, and I understand it's still pretty similar today, the government in Colombia controlled the towns, but the countryside was controlled by two guerrilla factions. Right. And it was a pretty frightening experience at the time, and I think that the only reason I wasn't kidnapped was it was very dark and they didn't see my face too well. But so that kind of idea of being kidnapped has been with me for a long time, and obviously then there were the hostage situations in Iraq and indeed in Iran, and all the time that the image of that had haunted me. Where did Roni came? I don't know. Probably I would think that I had caught on the news something about another guy being executed, probably in Texas when Bush was the governor there, and I just suddenly thought, God, can you imagine being the mother of somebody who is about to be executed? But I have to say, with Roni, I don't know specifically where the inspiration came from. As I say, with Titus, I suspect it was very much from that experience on that bus that day. And Roni, I think it's just a general being appalled at even the notion that in the 21st century, anywhere on this planet, there is capital punishment, let alone capital punishment meted out as frequently as it is in certain nations.
You wrote this in between the prophet of the new millennium and the God of the new millennium. Did anything you wrote, any ideas and thoughts that you developed when writing Titus and Roni, impact on the God of the new millennium?
Well, I suspect so, yes. I mean, not consciously, but I think that it is impossible that they don't impact on each other. I'm perfectly sure that, a painter, for instance, his next painting is influenced by his previous one because he notices how well a colour mixes together, or that this effect works and that effect doesn't. So I think that there has to be some kind of leak. But I'm not conscious of it. I think it happens at a much more subliminal level than that. I didn't think writing one or the other, oh God, that bit would be good in the other book.
Okay.
But, I certainly find that I learn from my own writing. And that's because I go back to books that I have read when I'm writing, quite a lot. I don't mean physically, I mean in my mind. And I think that reinforces a lot of the messages that I have learnt in other books. And from that, I think that yes, I do. It is a learning curve for me writing a book.
And finally, Greg, how would you like people to feel after reading this book?
Feel that they've read a good book. I certainly remember the first time that I read War and Peace and a couple of the other Russian novels, and a few really great books that I've read. There was, as I approached the end, a sense of disappointment because I knew that I'd never read that book again for the first time. And I think that's probably the highest accolade that you can pay to any writer. And I guess in an ideal world, that's what I would like people to feel reading the end of Roni. And I mean, unless they read them in obverse order, but I mean, that's the way they're printed in the order of Titus first and then Roni. But there's nothing to say you couldn't read them the other way around. Beyond that, I would hope that I had taken them maybe a station or two on their own journey, or help them to travel a little distance on their own journey again into themselves. I would hope that they would know themselves a bit better having read the book than they did before they set out on it.
Because I think it's worth mentioning. I mean, I've read the book. It's as you said earlier. The subject matter sounds quite dark and quite sort of dismal, but as you read the books, when you come to the end of the books, that's certainly not how you feel, is it? There's more of a positive outlook than a negative once you finish the books.
Well, I mean, I'm thrilled that was your reaction, and I think that that you're a better person to answer the question about how anybody would feel at the end of reading them, because what I felt at the end of writing them was huge relief that I'd actually finished writing them. and I don't think that I'm the best person best qualified to actually judge what it would be like to read them with an objective eye.